It's an interesting idea, to be sure. It's been tried before, though. It's generally referred to as direct democracy. It's the one man, one vote, the whatever the majority rule or mob rule, and which is where democracy, the word comes from, demos and kratian, basically mob rule, and it gets tried a lot throughout all of human history. The founders did a lot of research on this, and they looked at Greece and so forth, and they found that the majority is never restrained. And as soon as you can get 51% to agree to vote to enslave the other 49%, they will do so every single time. And I mean, and if they don't get their way, the mob becomes angry and violent and so on. Like this is, I mean, like this has been, history is replete with this. This is tons and tons and tons of documented history that show these kinds of things not really working out. So what they did was they took the idea of sort of a Roman model and a Swiss model. And a bit of the English model, the Old English, the Magna Carta style, and they kind of merged all these together, trying to come up with a way to really chain down government. Now, before my Spooner people start in with the furious typing with their thumbs, and just note that the American people don't really have to agree to a constitution. That really doesn't apply to them in that sense. It applies to the government, because it says, like in the Bill of Rights, for example, it says, Congress shall not. It says specifically over and over, shall not, shall not, shall not, right down the list. And it's saying that you have these rights by virtue of your humanity, or by given to you by God, or like whatever you want to call it. But I mean, it's like these rights are self-evident. You have the right to speak freely. Other people are not obligated to listen to you, right? It's freedom with no obligation on the other side of that. That's always the challenge. It's the challenge that I have a lot of times with a lot of my left followers, you know, that get stuck in this sort of loop of like, well, you know, we can have free this and free that. That's not free. It's just that you're not paying for it. And if you're always in the majority, well, then your life is going to be wonderful because you're always going to be voting for whatever you want. But as soon as the majority goes against you, well, then it can be really bad. So the founders sought to create a constitutional republic, which was the idea of, I think it was the 12 Tables of Roman Law. Originally, the idea was that, you know, what the government will not be doing. And so it leaves people alone. It leaves the regular people get left alone. They can do whatever they want. You can do whatever you want to do, as long as you're not violating the rights of somebody else. Pretty simple. I mean, in other words, don't cause harm or loss. Those two statements encompass basically everything. Pretty much every eventuality is encompassed in don't cause any harm or loss. Really simple, you know, to your fellow countrymen. Okay, I mean that's kind of how it works, right? So, or your fellow man. If you want to broaden it to the world, I guess you could do that too if you want. My point being is that those kinds of things have been tried before, and they end up failing. It's where the Electoral College comes from, actually. The people who don't like the Electoral College are exactly the reason why there's an Electoral College. Because otherwise you would have, like, seriously, like, what, 5 or 6 states in the U.S. that would get whatever they wanted. They could just enslave, literally, the other states. And the other states don't want that. So, you know, generally speaking, most people don't want to be, at least they claim they don't want to be enslaved. Now, I would argue that maybe there's something, too, that there is a chunk of our population in the world that love being enslaved, because then there's no responsibilities, right? They don't have any responsibilities of being an owner, because that's tough. And I don't mean a slave owner. I mean just like an owner of anything. A lot of responsibility with that, because ownership implies responsibility. So we've talked about this in the past. But there are a lot of people who don't want any responsibilities. We call them libertarians. So they don't want having freedom is not the same thing as wanting no responsibility. Okay, so anyway, this is sort of the challenge with it, and it's not that it's not necessarily a bad idea. And you're right, the technology does exist. That at this point, the question, of course, is always who controls the technology, which leads me into the next video I'm going to do.